My name is Dave Poland, and I'd like to welcome you to Portland Film Beat. My guests tonight are Tad Newberry and Phil Mandel. They are trying to get this book, From a Name to a Number, by Alter Wiener, a Holocaust survivor's autobiography, made into a film. I'd like to welcome you guys aboard. How you doing, Phil?
Hello,
Tad?
Howdy. Good to see you.
How did you guys meet Alter? Did you meet him first?
I did, in fact. I used to work with his son at a startup company back in the 90s.
Oh, really?
And when his son got married, Alter and his wife came out from New York City for the wedding. So I met this elderly gentleman and his wife, and I thought, oh, this is my friend's parents. That's all I knew. I didn't know he was a Holocaust survivor. I knew nothing except that he's my friend's dad.
Okay. And Ted, you met him through Phil?
Met him through Phil, yeah. Right. Phil and I had met at the Beaver and Chamber of Commerce, gosh, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. I did a couple projects for him, and he came to me about 3 years ago with the book in hand and said, you make movies, right? And I said, well, small ones, corporate and those things. He said, this needs to be a movie. So I read it within the next week or so, and I think before I was even done, I called him and said, yeah, this has got to be a movie. So.
Okay, so that's when you guys hooked up, but you met Alter, then you read the book and said, okay, this has to be made into a movie.
And then went to a presentation and met him.
Okay, so Alter's story is pretty interesting. I mean, he survived 35 months in a Nazi concentration camp, and it was a very young age. Is this story going to be told from a young boy's perspective or from his adult view perspective?
Good question. My view of how the movie will play is basically this book brought to life.
Okay.
So we'll start when he's a youngster with the beautiful family life that he grew up with. Very, very warm environment.
So it'll be a period piece?
Yeah.
Meaning that it would take place in the actual time frame?
I beg your pardon. Yes, that's correct. And so we would show him and the very warm family life that he grew up with, and going to public school and religious school, and learning valuable lessons from his parents, like we all did. And then here come the Nazis. The Germans invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, and everything changed.
Okay. And Phil, you're the producer?
Yes, sir. I own the rights.
And you're the director. And who's the writer?
I have a draft of a screenplay from a student screenwriter who just graduated from Portland State University. Her name is Lena Baisden-Tankut. It's a lot of syllables, but she's very, very talented.
Where's that?
She came very highly recommended.
Where's that located?
Well, she lives in Portland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so I was referred to her by her instructor, actually, at Portland State University. And we met, she read the book, she came to hear Alter speak, and she gets it. It's very, very important that the people who are running the show, as far as this movie goes, producer, director, the AD, screenwriter, everybody understands why this has to be told as opposed to just somebody doing a job. Right. Because then we'll have all our passion in it.
Okay. Ted, what's going to set this film, since you're the director, what's going to set this film apart from other stories about the Holocaust?
Well, number one, it's what he's doing today, and we're not sure where the story's going to start, but it could start with what he does today, which is goes around to schools, prisons, churches, businesses, anybody that will have him, and he tells his story live for an hour to an hour and a half, and he's 86, 87 years old now. Wow. He stands the whole time, tells his story, and he's changing lives with telling his story. He's had how many letters from
50?
Potential suicide people?
Oh, over 100.
Over 100.
Yeah.
And then
are they Holocaust survivors or just people?
The letters?
No.
Oh, from kids in grade school all the way up.
Oh, because of his impact of how he survived.
He'll tell the story.
Encouraging them to survive.
Or they'll read his book, and he's had over 100, Phil said, from kids who were going to kill themselves. And they hear his story, and they say, oh my gosh, I've got nothing to kill myself over after hearing your story.
Okay.
And here he is telling this story about love, forgiveness, and hope.
And he watched his family members getting executed.
He did, yeah.
And so, wow, it does have to have a big impact.
So that's our main difference is it's not just going to be a Nazi story in the camps. Of course, we're going to show that because there's a whole generation who hasn't seen that yet. Schindler's List was 20 years ago.
Right, and there hasn't been a Holocaust film.
There's not been much since then, yeah. So, and like Phil was saying, we want to show the whole thing. show his idyllic childhood that he really had. So we're going to show before, during, and after
Okay.
the actual Holocaust, and how it still lives with him today.
All right. As a director and the producer, do you see this as a documentary piece? When I mean documentary, or a narrative film? Documentary meaning, is it just going to be recorded, or is it, as a narrative film, is it going to be interpreted and dramatic?
We see it as a narrative.
Okay.
Someone else is actually working on the documentary, which will be like you would see on OPB.
So there's going to be two parts to this?
Essentially, yes.
Oh, good.
And maybe even a third that we'll get to
Wow.
in just a minute.
Well,
But
okay, good.
We see this one as a full-fledged narrative, a la Schindler. We think of it as the next Schindler's List.
So then a feature
because-
film, like a 90-minute.
Right.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Correct. If I may, before we go too far, I want to correct one thing.
Okay, good. Yeah, no.
And forgive me, but he didn't actually watch any of his family members get killed.
Oh, he didn't?
No, he was 14 when the Nazis, or the Germans, I don't know if they were Nazis, but Germans knocked on the door of their apartment in Poland in the middle of the night and took his older brother away. He did not see his older brother again until he met up with him in camp,
At least he got
not
met up
knowing,
with them in
not
camp.
knowing that he was going to be in the same camp as his brother.
Wow.
short time,
Yeah, because they usually like pull
Yeah.
family members apart randomly.
Oh, yeah.
Without
Right. And
thought.
several months later they did, when they shipped Alter to another camp, separated him from his older brother at that time, and he has never seen his older brother again.
Is there a reason why they did that? Was that just to torture him? And is that told in going to be told in the story?
It's a good question. When Alter is asked that question after his presentations during Q&A, he says that if you understand how the system works, basically the Jews were used, or the prisoners, not just Jews, as slaves. So wherever labor was needed the most, that is where they would send
Okay.
the prisoners.
And actually, most of that labor was to support the war machine.
Exactly right.
And the Autobahn. I mean, there's a lot of modern day Germany that was built on the backs of these people. That, you know, we hear about the war effort, but you don't really hear
Right.
about them. I think Alter worked on part of the Autobahn. There was
Correct.
part where they're clearing ground for that, and you think, you know, we fly over that. I haven't been there, but people fly over that today and think, isn't this so cool? It's like, sure.
We've already talked about this, but I have the question written down, so I want to ask it. Ted, why is this story important? And maybe Phil, you can jump in too. Why
Sure.
is this story important?
I think it's important because, and you've tapped into it, what you said a little bit ago, the universality of it. And we've had several people say, well, have you gone to Jewish groups for money? And it's like, we have, but they're not always interested. But this is not a Jewish story. And it's what Alter
And I have
found.
a question about that, but we're going to watch the trailer first
Okay.
before I get on that.
Okay.
Go ahead, keep going. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say just the universality of it, and that's
It's
one
not
of the
just
things,
a Jewish story.
No, and that's one thing Alter drives home to every audience he speaks to, and it's in the book.
And
That
so
this
that's
could
what's going
happen
to set this apart.
Right.
Is that it's not just a Jewish story.
And it
we'll
can
talk
happen.
about
It
that
can
in a
happen
minute.
today. That's what he truly tries to tell people.
It does happen today.
It's happening today. I
It
should
happened
say.
in Darfur. 400,000 people
Yeah.
were killed in, 2010?
Yeah.
Serbia, genocide again.
Right.
And that's, 20 years ago.
Right.
So it continues. And in Nigeria and Cambodia, I mean, this keeps on happening.
Yeah.
That's one of my questions was, will the story will the film touch upon how that happens or why it happens? I don't know. I mean, what happens
one
that
thing-
causes these groups of
that's
people
one
to
thing
want to kill each other and create genocide,
Yeah.
or at least ethnic cleansing, where they try to get rid of the people from their land, but genocide, where they try to just completely get rid of them?
I don't think there is a good why, and that's one thing Alter says in the book when he's at the grave of his father. He's pleading, "Why did they kill you, Daddy?" And he doesn't know today why.
Why they
He can
did
say,
that.
"Well, they're evil. They hate these kind of people." But the why, there's just really not a very good why.
Yeah.
You can't really explain evil all that well,
No.
or hate. You know.
That's a
No.
good point. If I could, I'd like to chime in on why the story is important.
Yes, I do want you to chime in.
And
Chime away.
And
Chime away.
And what makes this story unique? I had been first of all, my parents were refugees from Vienna in 1939. So after the Anschluss, when Germany took over Austria, several months after that, my parents managed to get out, and that's a whole different story.
Did they come to the States at that time or move to another country, then the States?
Yes.
Okay.
They escaped to other countries and then met up in New York because
Wow.
everyone came through Ellis Island. But I had always assumed that when the war was over and all these camps were liberated, that everyone who had been in those concentration camps was now free and could have a life like anybody else.
And life was grand.
And that is not the case. Alter had a very, very difficult time for many years after the war. And of course, he's still all
So that's
survivors.
going to be touched upon in the film as well.
Yeah.
Big time, yeah.
And as far as I know, that's unique in terms of Holocaust movies, is that they all sort of end at the end of the war.
Yeah, when people are being liberated.
And then everyone
it's actually-
assumes,
it's
like
not
I
com-
did,
yeah.
that once you're liberated, and here you are, you know.
Well, I think we all assume that because that's what we see in the traditional Holocaust films.
Correct.
We don't see the aftermath and the horrors of afterwards. So what emotions will the audience feel when they watch the film, Phil?
Wow. Well, the first thing is shock and disbelief when the Germans invade Poland, and we find out how Alter's father was murdered. In other words, what happened was the family fled from their little town that it's hard for me to pronounce, called Chardov.
Well, he says it much better than I do.
Forgive us. So we call it Char now because
Yeah.
we're Americans. We can't.
Okay,
he
no,
laughs.
you don't have to explain to
He laughs
anybody
at
here
us.
or in the audience.
A little
I'm
town
sure.
near Krakow in Poland. That's the best I can do.
I can say that one.
And they fled into the interior of Poland away from Germany, but they had to leave Alter's father behind because he owned a store and they needed the groceries in his business. So the Polish army ordered him to stay behind so he could help supply the troops.
Because they're fighting the Germans who were coming in, so.
Right, and eventually they got overtook, and anybody who was
so they
helping
got-
was
so-
considered a collaborator at that time, probably.
Well, they fled several dozen kilometers inland, and then they were stuck for about 3 months because they couldn't get back home.
Wow.
They finally got back home, and his father was nowhere to be found. And eventually what they found out is that he had been buried in a mass grave. The Germans had rounded up 38 people at random, mostly Jews, some Christians, because as we said earlier, this isn't just a Jewish story. And literally, they rounded up 38 people and shot them.
Wow.
But they didn't shoot them just to kill them. That would have been merciful. They shot them so that they would bleed and suffer until they expired. And then they threw them into a pit like you would throw stones into a pit.
Right. Did they use them like as an example? Let other people watch them suffer?
Probably.
And it's
Probably
like, okay,
partly.
here's what's going to happen to you if you help or collaborate.
Again, the whys are really kind of hard to pin down.
I bet.
But one thing we know about, I don't even like to mention the guy's name with the funny mustache, the little guy.
Yeah.
He is very vocal about saying he patterned his whole crap after the Roman Empire. And if you see what the Roman Empire did with people they conquered, it was the same type of stuff. They would crucify thousands of people and line the roads with them, and as an example, and to say, look at the power
Put them
we
up on
have.
the poles and people
Yeah.
walk down the road.
And so this little guy was the same mindset. He was wanting to resurrect that empire. That was the Third Reich, was the rising of the empire. So
we're going to take a quick break here and watch a short that was produced by these two gentlemen about Alter Wiener, and we'll be right back.
At the very first day, marching to work, I learned something which is extremely important. I had the impression that only me, because I happened to be a Jewish boy, that I was oppressed. But then I saw marching to work so many different people. Each group had a different badge. Who were they? Jehovah's Witnesses, Gypsies, homosexuals, Ukrainians, maybe 30, 40 different groups. What did I learn? Every Jew was a victim, but not every victim was a Jew. Please remember that. Every Jew was a victim, but not every victim was a Jew. It is my personal conviction, not my belief, my conviction. If Hitler would have won the war, you wouldn't be sitting here in a free society. Hitler had a plan. Heute Deutschland, morgen über alles. Today we are in Germany. Tomorrow we shall be everywhere. You don't have blue eyes and blonde hair. You are not a pure-blooded German. You are inferior. I am going to enslave you. And if I feel like, I'm going to annihilate you. It's very well documented. That is his plan.
Wow, that was really good. That was really interesting. I mean, what I liked what he said was like every Jew was a victim, but not every victim was a Jew. And you know, when you hear about the Holocaust story or you watch previous Holocaust stories, it seems like it's all about the Jews. But actuality, from what I read up before we got in here, is that there was like 5 to 10 million other people. There was 6 million Jews, if I'm correct, estimated. But there was like 5 to 10 million other people who were not Jews. They were gypsies. They were Jehovah's
homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, right? Ukrainians, prisoners of war.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Hitler's goal was to conquer the world and eliminate anyone who was not purebred German or
and
Aryan.
even imperfect Germans. There were, you know, tons of handicapped.
Imperfect Germans. Oh, gee.
Well, handicapped babies, handicapped German
yeah.
babies, if they're mentally retarded, deaf, blind, they didn't see their second birthday.
So that's what's one of the things that's going to really set this story apart, is that it doesn't talk about just the Jews. It's not just a Jewish story. It's a story about humanity.
It's told from Jewish eyes.
Right.
Definitely. We want to show him in the synagogue. He's a strong man of faith, and that's very apparent through the camps. People ask, how did he get through the camps? Well, he had all 150 Psalms memorized, and the Nazis couldn't take that from him. So he could sit and say them in his mind, say them verbally, and a lot of the other Jews were the same way.
He had all the Psalms memorized?
150. Well, I think that was typical in those days.
Yeah, but I've read the Psalms, and
I've got one. I got 23. Well, I used to have it memorized.
I don't have any. I don't have one.
But
I have a few verses
but
here.
then
and
there
there.
were also prayers. You know, he had lots of prayers memorized, and I think there were rabbis in there when they would try to have you know, synagogue services in the camps when they could. So.
Okay. I'm not sure if this is a good question to ask or if it's possible. Do you have anyone interested at this time producing it? I know you're producing it, but do you have actually
money?
Money. Right.
We have. Well, I'll tell you what. My teammates are fantastic networkers.
Okay.
Tad is one of them. He has
Yeah, I
some
know.
amazing contacts.
He's contacting me all the time, but I don't have any money, so
I
you're
know
out of
Dave.
luck.
I know
Even
Dave.
more amazing than you, Dave. These are deep inside Hollywood. He'll talk about that, and then we have a third partner who unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight, an associate producer, Melissa Dowd, and she has also hooked us up with some fabulous people. So do you want to talk about without mentioning names?
Yeah, I don't want to mention any names because we don't have contracts. There's no promises.
Right.
But there's you mentioned Schindler's List, and I'll just say we're connected with somebody. Connected with that movie.
Good.
In a big way. And when I first talked to him and told him the story, I talked to him on the phone. We've talked about it a dozen times now. Well, first of all, you know you have a good project when you can call these people and they don't say, "Quit calling me."
Oh, really?
It's not
yeah.
me. It's not Phil. It's the project. And when
That's
you can
good.
still call them and say, "Hey, we made a little more progress," they go, "Great, tell me about it." That's kind of cool. So yeah, I don't want to mention any names, but there's some good names, but like I said, no promises, no contracts, so
Right.
it's just talk right now. So
You guys are going to make a short, maybe from some of the couple of quick shorts. Is that correct? Can you
well,
talk
just-
about that a little bit? Some of the scenes. Is it going to be scenes or?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So what the way that this developed is that I have the draft of the screenplay from my screenwriter, Lena, and I had a couple of well-known screenwriting people in Portland review it to give me comments because I want some
want
experienced professionals
Sure.
to review it. And one of them, whose name I would rather not mention, but he's a well-known screenwriter in the business. He said, you know, have you ever thought about making a short? Just take this episode from Alter's life and make a short film out of it. Stick it in festivals, win some awards, and you'll get more buzz for the movie. You'll be able to put the symbol for the award on the book if Alter wants to do that. So the episode that is the most powerful in Alter's life story, and of the 58,000 letters that he's received already, this particular episode is mentioned more than any other, which is when a German woman risked her life for him by hiding a sandwich every day for 30 days, as long as they both worked in the same building. They didn't work together because
Right.
the prisoners weren't allowed to go near the German workers. And in fact, the German workers weren't allowed to even look at the prisoners. But this
Wow.
noble German woman hid a sandwich for him under a box, somehow made eye contact with him and hinted that there's something to look at over there. If she would have been caught, she would have been executed immediately.
All right.
She risked her life for him 30 times.
How long is this short going to be?
And so what we want to do is take that and package it
Right.
and show just that episode in maybe 3 to 5 minutes.
3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So what you're going to touch upon is that not all the Germans were.
Right.
We just, when you think about the Holocaust, you think of all of Germany as inhumane.
Correct.
But then there's the Diary of Anne Frank. I don't know if that was in Poland
He brings
too,
this.
though.
That's another one of his
Wasn't it?
big things he brings out is you
Is that
can't-
there was a lot of humanity
Netherlands.
left there, but
Oh,
there was
yeah.
the craziness of the whole event, and actually, the event kind of fireballed upon itself because not everybody was gung ho at first, but it kind of grew, didn't it?
It did
Is
because
that going to be
everybody.
part of the story?
Sure. Well, very likely it will come out because everybody lived under fear. You were afraid of your own neighbor. Because if
Oh,
you
so
say,
you had to participate, or
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
So, what do you see as the next steps for you guys in this project outside of making it short?
Well, it's a great question. I think we need to continue networking with the people that Tad and Melissa are connected with. And my main purpose, my whole entire goal in life, basically, once I obtain the movie rights from Alter, is to get as many people to read this book as possible.
Okay.
I'm absolutely convinced that if everyone on Earth experiences Alter's life story, either by reading the book or seeing the film, we will have world peace.
Is that right?
I have no doubt.
Okay.
And apparently I'm not the only one who thinks that way because a recent review posted on Amazon for the book, there's a fellow that says the exact same thing. He says if everyone would read this book, there would be no conflict in the world.
Wow, that's very.
And I'm
powerful.
convinced. And one reason is because of this German woman who illustrates that you cannot take an entire class of people and lump them all together as if they're one entity. Everyone has to be judged
Yeah.
on
Based
their own
on-
merits.
okay,
So
right.
prejudice and stereotyping are absurd, and I have never seen a better illustration than the way he talks about that German woman, because 3 weeks prior to that, a German guard, for no good reason, punched him and knocked out many of his teeth. Alter has no teeth.
Just
So-
for no reason.
For no
In
reason.
one of the camps. Yeah.
Yeah, he just felt like
And he was a young boy.
he was
Teenager.
15 or 16 at the time, probably 16,
Oh my gosh.
working under the guard of the Nazis.
So
Well, on that too. Remember,
So-
there was. I didn't know this till I read the book. There were lots of the prison wardens, whatever they call them, the heads of the camps.
Capos
And
or
the-
commandant.
Yeah,
Commandants.
and the guards too. Since Hitler. Oh, shoot, I said his name. Sorry. If you can edit that out.
that's all right.
Most of the Germans were off fighting, so as they lost army people to run the camps, he started releasing German prisoners to become prison guards.
Common criminals.
So you had murderers, rapists, thieves, arsonists running these camps sometimes, and these guys were just
Brutal.
brutal. So, and then they put on a Nazi uniform, and it's like
Well, what you're doing is you're giving a criminal
Yeah.
ultimate power.
License
and
to kill.
Yeah, license to behave in any way that
Literally,
they wish, which is horrid. I can't imagine.
So these are things I never knew. I learned so much reading that book, and I thought, I know about the Holocaust. You read the book, go, I thought I knew about
the Holocaust because
Yeah.
we base it upon previous films, and those
Yeah.
previous films are great. I mean, they do enlighten us, but they don't give us the whole story.
Let
They
me
don't
say,
give us
too,
the story about the 5 or 10 million other people who were killed besides the Jews, and they
Right.
don't talk about the aftermath of what the survivors have to go through.
Exactly.
So here's a question. I am going to be reading this, but
That's for you, yours to keep,
right,
obviously.
thank
too.
you. Anyway, after Alter got out of the concentration camps, was he in Germany? How did he get to the States? Is that going to be? That's pretty dramatic in itself, I would say.
It absolutely is, and it
How
was
long did it take him to get here?
a long and arduous process. Somewhere
Several years.
Oh my gosh, at
If
least
not.
8 years, as far as I remember.
Is that right?
He was essentially a refugee for many years, going from refugee camp to refugee camp, and finally to Palestine, where he had an uncle. Only he and 4 cousins survived, So one of the, and apparently his uncle too, I'm off on the count a little bit, but 123 members of his extended family were all murdered by the Germans. His both brothers, his parents, uncles, aunts, cousins, and so on.
Right.
Very few survived. And he finally, after a few years of going from refugee camp to refugee camp, made it to Palestine, and finally was able to live in relative peace.
Wow.
And start putting his life back together. So then he was on the Polish quota trying to get from Palestine to the United States for several more years.
But he
Finally, when he made it to the States, he has not left yet, and he feels blessed every day that he gets to
Can
live
we
in this
say
country.
where he lives?
Sure.
Sure. Not his address, but.
No, we won't say his address. Actually, Alter lives in Hillsborough. He lives very close by. He gives a lot of talks at local schools, which are very impactful from what I understand. And he gives a lot of talks locally all the time. Most of the time it's in schools. Why don't you go to the alterweiner.com website and you can find out when he's going to talk. I would like to promote this book, From a Name to a Number, Alter Weiner, A Holocaust Survivor's Autobiography. And we're kind of wrapping up here. We're getting close to our end. I want to thank Tad and Phil for being here and sharing the story, because there's a lot I've learned.
Absolutely.
And I'm really looking forward to seeing the film, because I think
So are we.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for Cinetopia.
That's right.
That's where the
There-
premiere will be.
there's so much more to the story
Yeah.
than just, it's not just a Jewish story. That's one of the things,
Right.
you know, all the Jews were victims, but not all the victims were Jews. I
Right.
mean, that's very powerful, especially when you watch that clip there and it showed all the different badges. I mean, it was real powerful. Anyway, right at this time, we're kind of closing and wrapping up. I want to thank Ellery Nelson, who is my director, and he does an awesome job in his studio over there, taking care of the cameras and the lights and the sound, and making certain that everything runs smooth in here. And I also want to thank the producer, who is my wonderful wife, Carol Poland. Until next time on Film Beat, Portland Film Beat, shoot for the silver screen.